This is a message for all of you that are dealing with the acute pain of divorce or a breakup. So this is for those of you that are still facing those endless nights and still feeling gutted by the pain. I've been there. I know what it's like. And many of you have reached out to me personally, but I know not everybody has, and it's impossible for me to speak to each of you individually. So this is the message that I want to give to those of you that are still in that very intense pain soon after divorce. So the first thing I want to say is I'm sorry. I know how hard it is, and there's nothing that I or anybody else can say or do that will take that pain away. And I also want you to know that I've been there. I know when all this first happened to me 5 years ago, I started reading books and blogs, and when people said it would be okay, I used to dismiss it. I was like, you've never been there. You have no idea what I'm feeling. And what I want you to understand is I do know. I have been there. And I want you to know at first that it does get better. I know that's impossible to believe right now, but it really and truly does. One of the weird things is that we think that however we feel right now is the way that we're always going to feel. And we don't often realize that everything changes, even pain. So I think that's the first thing to understand is that right now, even as hard as it is, it's not always going to stay that way, and it does get better. Just got to hang in there. The other thing that I want you to understand is that healing, you can think of healing falling into two basic categories. Healing can be active and healing can be passive. And the passive part of healing is simply allowing time to go by. And I've always hated that saying, time heals all wounds, because it doesn't really heal them. But it does soften all wounds and it changes them. So part of healing is just allowing that time to go by. Now, an aside on that, though, is that healing doesn't speak calendar. And don't expect yourself to feel a certain way because a certain number of months or years have passed or it's a certain anniversary. It happens when it happens, and it's not linear. You'll have bunch of good days and then something will happen and you'll have a bad day. But overall, as time goes by, it does get better. But healing is more than just a passive occurrence. If all you do is sit back and wait for time to go, you're not going to fully get there. It takes some work. In fact, I'm not going to lie to you, it takes a lot of work. One of the first things to be aware of is your thought processes. And in the beginning of a divorce or a breakup, it's almost like your ex or the situation kind of hijacks your brain. And every little thing will, turn into a thought about the situation and then kind of spiral down and you'll go from one to another. And before you know it, you're either anxious or angry or depressed or kind of whatever your emotion of the moment is. And it's easy for that to happen. But the thing is with our brains is the more they follow a pattern, the easier that pattern becomes. And so one of the first things to do is recognize those thought patterns that keep following into your brain and then stop them. I know, easier said than done. And there's a bunch of ways you can stop them. You can do something as simple as just distracting yourself. You can shift gears, try doing something completely different or something where you don't have time to think about something else, something that's kind of all-encompassing. I used to go for a run or do something physical because a lot of times that would kind of shut my brain up. The other thing that you can do that I think is so powerful for this is writing. You can do what I call a 3-part journal. And the way that the 3-part journal works is anytime you feel those thoughts coming into your brain, you pick up the pen and you start to write. And you start writing in the first section of the journal. And the first section is just all that anger, all that vitriol, the sadness. That's where you say all the things that you wish you could say. It's kind of the screaming and the crying. And don't censor yourself there. Just get out all that, the yuck. But you don't stop there, because if you stop there, you stay there. So then you move on to the second section of the journal. And the second section sort of has two parts. It's a little bit of problem solving of whatever's going on in your day or at that moment. And it's also gratitude for the things that you do have in your life. Some days you have to really reach, I know. You should see some of the silly things I wrote down I was thankful for. Gluten-free frozen pancakes. But hey, whatever works, something that you're grateful for. But you're still not done. Because before you put the journal away, you have to move on to the third section. And the third section is where you write down your hopes and your dreams for the future. And they can be anything. And you don't have to know how to get there yet, just where you want to be at some point someday. And the power in that journal is that it trains your brain how to go from those negative thoughts that love to take over and to then start thinking rationally in the moment and problem solve, and then to end with hope. And the only rule with that journal is anytime you write, you have to start in section 1 and end in section 3. So again, one of the first things to do is just recognize your thinking and do everything that you can do to get your thinking to not stay stuck in all of the anger and all the sadness. Because again, if you stay there, you stay there. Start thinking about better things. Another key to healing and helping yourself feel better in the early stages is what I call layering. And this is another intentional thing. This is a very active process. And layering is a way that you can reclaim memories and spaces and locations that used to have a positive association for you, but maybe don't anymore. For example, my ex and I had this one restaurant that we used to go to like once a week. It was basically our cheers. Everybody knew our names. And when he left, I lost that at first. It was too painful to go back. But I wasn't okay with that. That was a place that was special to me. So I started taking everybody there. Anytime I was getting together with friends, I was like, hey, let's go there. Even when I started dating, I took a bunch of my dates there. And what happened is that those newer memories layered over the old. And it was no longer the place that I went to with my ex. It was the place where I had that great dinner or whatever. And layering is one of those things that it can be a little scary because it does mean you have to face those places that cause memories. But you can't eliminate them forever, nor should you. So take back some of those special things and places and songs or whatever it is, and bring them into your present with something new, with a new memory. Another powerful thing that you can do, again, it's active, not easy, is reframing your story. I know right now you're probably thinking, it's not fair, this happened to me. You kind of are probably painting yourself as a victim of the story. I get it. I did it too. And one of the most important things I think is to start to shift your own story and start to write yourself more as the hero of your story. Think about less of what happened and more how you want to respond. And I personally think writing is really powerful for this because when you write it, you really start to believe it. But regardless how you do it, be careful of the words that you use. Be careful of how you paint yourself. Start to shift your perspective of things. Think about if you were going to narrate it, what would you say about what's going on? And one of the more important things you can do is create purpose for it. It happened. You can't change that. but you can assign meaning to what happened. And then one that I always talk about, and it's because it's so important, is gratitude. And I know you're probably going, how in the world do you expect me to be thankful, lady? I know. It is probably the most difficult thing you can do, but it's also the most healing thing that you can do. Because when gratitude is your wrapping paper, literally everything is a gift. And I'll give you an example of how I still use gratitude every month. So, as you know, my ex left me with a bunch of debt, and I've had to make monthly payments on, I tear up talking about it. I had to make monthly payments on one credit card that he used for his honeymoon with his other wife and other lovely things. And needless to say, every month when I make that payment, it's hard. Not only because I'm paying for his lies and it doesn't feel fair and all of that, but it's also a piece that still impacts me today. My finances are very different than they would be if I wasn't making these payments. But one of the things that I did from the very first one is every time I send that money, I write down something in my life that I'm thankful for that I would not have if it wasn't for all of this happening. And I'm now at something like 26 payments and 26 reasons to be grateful. And the gratitude helps me realize that even as much as I've lost, there really is so much more out there to be gained. And then the final thing I'd like to leave you with is while you're suffering, while you're healing, while you're going through that process, and yes, it's a process, not a switch, don't forget to live. Don't put your life on hold just because you're in pain, just because you're mourning the loss of your marriage. It's okay to feel okay, even while everything's falling apart around you. You don't have to hurt every moment of every day. You can take those moments to smile whenever they happen to arrive. And again, it does get better. You will be okay.